Well, that took a few minutes to get going tonight. Not quite sure why that is. Normally don't do this on a Saturday night, but it's cold out. I had some extra time on my hands, and well, this is something that's been sticking me for the past couple of days, and I haven't had time to get to it. So I made myself a good hot cup of coffee, and we're going to deal with it. About 2.5 years into President Trump's administration, I began to get this weary feeling about Mike Pence. He loved to come across as this Boy Scout, as this mild mannered, and of course, as a pastor, I have to be very careful here, but, portraying himself as a born again Christian. But it was constantly all of this stuff going on within the Trump White House, never ending investigations, drama, and here and there we would see a staff member leave and there would be dust ups and kick ups of what they were doing inside the White House. It was creating, just disharmony, etc. Omarosa, of course, being at the top of the list, and a few other people that you look at and think, why did Trump ever bring those people on board? But I don't know if it was prophecy or just an intuition I had, having been born and raised in New York. But I began to get this feeling that President Trump had an enemy within that he thought was an ally. And I really began to look at Mike Pence. And I began to voice that on my radio show. And oh man, did I get backlash for going after St. Mike. And after the 2020 election, I was proven right. The enemy within. I really knew that he had totally outed himself for what he was during the beginning of the pandemic. He was the one that brought Fauci in as supposed to be going to be the main advisor. We're going to follow the Fauci guidelines. 6 feet, 2 weeks to flatten the curve became 2 years, and I began to do some looking into things, finding out that Mike Pence and Fauci and Bill Gates, the three of these guys, had traveled the world for over a decade, lecturing endlessly on the need for mass inoculation, etc., etc., etc. There had been some outbreak of something in Indiana, and Mike Pence had, quote unquote, handled it. And so President Trump turned to his VP and said, all right, you're point man on this project. And when we had, I know, the most perfect election that ever happened, and the president wanted, obviously, instinctively, knowing something might be a bit askew here, and Mike Pence, the establishment, and that was really why he was put there. He was really the pick of Ivanka and her husband, Jared, that by bringing somebody like Pence on, that would give Trump credibility. That was their thinking. When in reality, it was really just bringing the deep state, the swamp, into the White House, which, again, I began saying that a full year before the pandemic ever hit, and I have been vindicated. I have been proven correct. My issue with Mike Pence right now is that he won't just go away, but this new book that he's written, and I'm going to be honest, I'm not going to read it. And by the way, I've done this with Bill Clinton, Barack Obama. I don't read books by former team members who then want to come out and trash the captain of the team. I don't do that. I didn't read any of those books, and there were hundreds out there about Bill Clinton from, former staff members, etc. I didn't read any about Barack Obama. I'm not going to read one about Donald Trump. The only book that I've read about a former president was a book that was written about George W. Bush, and the entire history of his crime family, but that wasn't written by somebody who was ever on Team Bush. That was written by someone else who did the investigative work and knew of the Bush family and had interacted with the Bush family, but was never part of Team Bush. So this would be like reading about what Jesus and the disciples were doing in a book by Judas. I don't do that. I haven't done it to Democrats. I'm certainly not going to do it to President Donald Trump. So Mike Pence, right away, you have proven how absolutely disloyal you are. You remind me of that Richard Dortch, who at one time worked for Jim Baker at PTL Ministries and Heritage USA. And after Heritage USA had fleeced hundreds of thousands of people out of literally millions of dollars, and Jim Baker had to go to prison, out comes Richard Dortch, who was the right-hand man at PTL, was brought in by Jim Baker, by the Assemblies of God, to give Baker and his ministry some credibility. And afterwards, when it all went down, when it all went south, he writes a book about integrity and character and how he lost it. And then he wrote a follow-up book on how he got it back by basically throwing his former boss under the bus and blaming everything on him, despite the fact he was right there through all of it, authorizing payments of hush money to Jessica Hahn and living the lifestyle like the rest of them. But then when Jim Baker was in shackles and in prison, all of a sudden Richard Dortch has an attack of conscience. And of course, he probably cut some sweetheart deal, so he didn't have to go to jail either. And that's what I see Mike Pence doing. I'm sorry. Mike Pence wants to still be part of the establishment. Now, first of all, Mike, let me help you out here. As a pastor, let me say this to you because you claim to be a born-again Christian. What you have done is beyond disloyal. But let me help you out here, because I think part of the reason you're under this delusion that you might throw your hat in the ring and run for the presidency, not going to happen. Not going to happen. Trust me, nobody in this country is jumping up and down. I wish Mike Pence would run. I wish Mike Pence would run. So that's just a waste, Mike. Stop dreaming. Stop. Now, as far as actually, throwing Donald Trump under the bus that lives were placed in grave danger on January, will you please stop? And here's how I know all of this is over-the-top hyperbole and bullhawk. Right now, the lying legacy corporate corrupt mainstream media loves Mike Pence. Loves Mike Pence. The New York Times giving him glowing reports. He's been on everybody. He's been on CNN. He's been on PMSNBC. I'm sure. I think he was on Hannity. No surprise they're over at Faux Pas News, formerly known as Fox News. He'll never do a show like this. He'll never come on my radio show. He'll never let me, for this podcast, interview him, because I would actually ask him real questions. I would back it up to the pandemic when he sat there, and I would call him out for how he lied in the face of Laura Ingraham. And Laura knew she was being lied to. In fact, you watch that interview that she did where she was asking about things like vaccine passports, and this is going to be a limitation on freedom. And he just, oh no, Laura, no, you're misunderstanding all of this completely. And just the look on Laura's face, she knew he's lying to me. You think? In fact, the look on her face was like, he's deep state. Yeah, Shazam. Welcome to the club. Glad you made it to the party. You're a little late, but you made it. And that's Mike Pence. He is dishonorable, and he is disloyal. We have reports of FBI insurgents within the crowd on January the 6th. Stirring things up. Come on, Rand Paul has been all over that. Other senators have been all over that. And the VP, the right-hand man, wants to throw the president under the bus. Because Mike Pence wants a seat at the table, and he wants to stay in good with the status quo. And Mike. See, that alone shows me you're not actually a Christian. because people who are Christian, especially those that their faith is very serious to them, they automatically become on the outs with the status quo people. They're automatically, because you take a stand for your faith and your faith doesn't allow you to participate or practice certain things, automatically you become a pariah. But the fact that you want to continue to hang with that which just for your faith alone wouldn't want to have anything to do with you, the fact that you're doing this politically says to me a lot about your so-called Christianity. It's disloyal. I don't read or absorb this stuff about Democrats from their former staff members. I'm certainly not going to do it about President Donald Trump. Just not going to do it. That's a principle I live by. That's a core value that I have. Mike Pence, uh, you lied about the vax passports. You lied about they're not going to be mandatory or a limitation of freedom. And they were starting to roll out. And it was literally, if you'll let me say it this way, the hand of God that all of that just kind of blew up. See, as everybody's talking about, the change happening in Congress and what is Joe Biden up to now, and Chuck Schumer going to try to ram through some radical legislation before the Republicans get there. Nobody's talking about how the Senate voted. I think it was 64 to 36, if I've got the count right. It was 64 to 36 to relieve President Biden of his COVID emergency powers. Bump, ba-dum, bump. There's only, I think, a couple of news outlets that even touched on it, and it was hit on very quickly, and it was boom, on to the next thing. So it isn't just that we can start talking about this a little bit more open and free now, but the Senate, even before the new Republicans got there, has stepped in and said, Mr. President, your never-ending power is over. It's rolled back. And that's a good thing, by the way. In fact, that's a great thing. And again, nobody's really talking about President Trump's speech the other night where he threw his hat back into the ring. Some people are saying it was boring. It's funny. He holds a rally where, he delivers his zingers and has everybody cheering for 2 hours, and he's mean, he's unhinged, he's insulting, he's degrading. He comes out and he gives an address that is incredibly presidential, on point, and made an overall emphasis over and over that this movement wasn't about him. It's about we the people. And the media, of course, downplays that, and they want this big DeSantis Trump. And, thumbs up to Governor Ron DeSantis, who stepped in and told super PACs, stop raising money in my name to run against Donald Trump. I haven't said anything about whether I'm running or not running, so stop lying to my supporters. Stop collecting money in my name. I give Ron DeSantis a thumbs up for. That's integrity, something that Mike Pence doesn't have. Ron DeSantis, that's integrity. But in reality, I know we didn't get the red wave we were hoping for. But if you start to look at some of these races, take a second look, it was not the wipeout that the media and the Democrats and even rhinos are trying to portray it as. I already said before, and I'm serious about this, Mitch McConnell did what he could on purpose to purposely stop the Republicans from taking back the Senate. Why? He didn't want Trump Republicans there. It's no more complicated than that. He worked against GOP candidates. He sent money to the people they were running against. Mitch McConnell is another traitor within. He's working with Democrats and with the status quo ruling class leadership. They don't want Donald Trump again. So Mitch McConnell did everything he could to ensure that the Republicans would not take back the Senate. But if you really, a lot of times when we make comments as things are happening, it takes a little time to let the dust settle and really begin to absorb and look at what happened. So you had Mitch McConnell thwarting the efforts of key Republicans. He gave zero help to Herschel Walker. But also, what we saw happen was red states got redder, but blue states did not get bluer. As more and more election results come in, look at how many new Republicans are going to the United States House of Representatives from New York, from California. No, I'm not saying that they become purple. No, I'm not saying that. But they're not necessarily navy blue now, they're royal blue. And some other royal blue states are now purple. There has definitely been a weakening of what happened to the Democratic Party on the midterm nights. And you have Donald Trump to thank for that. And by the way, this big wave of Latino voters, especially in Florida, it had nothing to do with Ron DeSantis or Marco Rubio. That, again, was the policies of Donald J. Trump. He has made more inroads with minority communities than any other Republican ever. That's fact. So when we really start to break it down, Trump did not have a bad night. Some of the what we would call the key races didn't go our way. And of course, the media wants to pin all that on Donald Trump. But, look at the strange year we've had. Like, take baseball, for example. The New York Mets and the Atlanta Braves, best records in the National League, and neither team could get past the first round of the playoffs. And a couple of teams that weren't even supposed to be there made it. Kudos to Dusty Baker. Glad he finally got a win. I am. I'm a big Mets fan, but Dusty Baker's been around the game a long time. He's a class act. Glad he won it. He deserves it. But it has been a strange year that way. And it was a strange year politically. Everything was set for a red wave. It really was. Now, I think part of it, and I think Dan Bongino hit on this a little bit, and I think he's right. The Biden administration eased up on a few things at the last couple of months. They got as many of the COVID restrictions out of our way, even though Fauci still tries to go on the news and still be relevant. They pumped enough of the strategic oil supply into our economy to lower the gas price a little bit. Now you're going to see everything get cattywampus, especially the closer we get to the holidays and the colder it gets. But they eased off enough that they could sell the American people on this idea. Things are getting better. It's just taking us a little time, but we're getting there. And people were kind of like, yeah, okay. And I think that was a big part of it. In other words, like Dan Bongino said, people haven't felt the pain enough yet. And the Democrats have buku, and I mean buku seats they have to defend in 2024. So it was not the near devastation that the media and the pundits would like to portray it as. We didn't get our red wave like we thought, but I'm telling you, you look at that election map and you look at how many blue congressional districts we moved red. And again, what's going on with the election in Arizona. I mean, it's just, But of course, it was perfect. And in California, the California Republicans there did exactly what I advocated the other day, and some of you jumped down my throat for. They used Democratic strategies, and they won. When it came to taking advantage of, you got early voting, you've got these drop-off boxes everywhere, and Republicans did the same thing Democrats do, and they pulled it out. I understand. I believe all that early voting and nonsense needs to go away. I love what President Trump said. Let's get back to voter ID, same day voting. You're going to vote on election day and it's a paper ballot. Boom, boom, but those three things would eliminate most election fraud, which is why the Democrats don't like it. But I've also said until we get there, first we've got to get these governors' mansions back and get Republicans in the attorney general's positions so that we can make those changes to the state laws. So until we get those governor mansions back, what we have to do is use the same methods that we detest the Democrats using, and how they don't win elections based on candidates. Take a look at Fetterman. Fetterman is a case study, and he didn't win because of who he is. Mitch McConnell said, we just didn't have enough quality candidates. For heaven's sakes, they literally elected somebody who's completely brain dead out of Pennsylvania on the Democratic ticket. Why? Because it didn't matter. They had done so much early voting and ballot harvesting that was already in the bag before election day even got here. And the Republicans did the same thing in California, and they have created upsets all over California. We need to do that moving forward, take back these governors' mansions, take back the attorney general's positions, and then we can change the laws and end all that. See, they ended all that nonsense. They used to have that in Florida. All that ended, and then look at the landslide Ron DeSantis had in Florida. And again, I know he's trying to take a little victory lap there, but I would remind the good governor, remember, you wouldn't even be there to begin with had it not been for Donald Trump. He launched you. I am very big on loyalty, and I am very much have a disdain for those who are disloyal. Mike Pence. So we will see moving forward if President Trump modifies his behavior a tad. And we will see if DeSantis throws his hat in the ring. But I can tell you this, Mike Pence, you don't stand a chance. You're disloyal, and it really, really, really annoys me. And it has annoyed me since I was a kid. I was one of those kids, this might shock a few of you, most of you probably not. I was one of those kids that when the teacher left the classroom, I got up, talk, and fool around. And I used to get so mad when the teacher would get back and I would get in trouble. Not that I didn't deserve to get in trouble, It was always one of the kids who was horsing around with me who would then snitch me out. And I just look at him like, okay. See, Mike Pence wants to now just completely distance himself from Donald Trump. I'm Sergeant Schultz. I know nothing. I was just there being good and praying and being a Boy Scout. Mike, you're disloyal. You want to stay around the Washington inside loop because you are part of the stench and the rot of the deep state. And I can only hope that your book ends up on the 2 for $1 table right next to the collection written by Hillary Rodham Clinton.